pretended to be poor. His family and wife's reaction will break your heart. The rain fell softly on the rooftop of Edward Marshall's sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, its gentle patter a stark contrast to the storm brewing in his heart. At 62, Edward was one of America's wealthiest men, owner of tech firms, luxury car dealerships, and properties from Manhattan to Malibu. Yet, as he stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his study, gazing at the manicured gardens, below he felt like a ghost in his own home. His wealth had built this life, but it had also built walls between him and his family, between truth and pretense. His wife, Margaret, 58, only smiled when a new credit card arrived or a vacation was booked. His daughter, Chloe, 25, lived for Instagram, showcasing designer bags and private jet selfies to her million followers. Only his son, Nathan, 22, seemed to see him, not as a bank account, but as a father. Nathan's quiet presence was Edward's anchor, but even that couldn't quell the growing ache in his chest. Was he loved for who he was, or for what he provided? The question gnawed at him, relentless and unforgiving. One chilly evening, Edward sat at the mahogany dining table, the clink of silverware echoing in the cavernous room. Margaret sipped her wine, her eyes fixed on her phone, scrolling through jewelry listings. Chloe, her blonde hair perfectly styled, giggled at a notification, snapping a photo of her plate. Nathan, sitting across from Edward, caught his father's gaze. "Dad, you okay?" he asked softly, his brow furrowed. Edward forced a smile. "I'm fine, son." But he wasn't. The emptiness was suffocating. He was tired of Margaret's cold detachment, tired of Chloe's shallow priorities, tired of wondering if his family would stay if the money vanished. That night, alone in his study, Edward made a call that would change everything. "Michael," he said to his trusted assistant, his voice steady but heavy, "transfer all liquid assets to the private account. Pause operations on the companies. Tell everyone I'm on a sabbatical, and make it look like we've lost everything. No one must know I'm still wealthy." Michael hesitated. "Sir, this will shake your family to the core. Are you sure?" "That's the point," Edward replied. "I need to know who they really are." The next morning, Edward gathered his family in the living room, its opulent decor a cruel irony given what he was about to say. Margaret strode in, her silk robe swishing, irritation etched on her face. "Why are we up so early, Edward?" Chloe slumped onto the couch, phone in hand, while Nathan stood quietly by the fireplace. Edward took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "I have bad news. The businesses have collapsed. The banks froze our accounts. We've lost everything." His voice cracked, not from pretense but from the weight of the lie he had to sell. Margaret's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. "What do you mean, everything? This is a joke, right?" "I wish it was," Edward said, meeting her eyes. "We have to leave this house today. The only place we have left is my father's old cabin in Vermont." Chloe's scream pierced the air. "Vermont? A cabin? Daddy, no. I can't live without Wi-Fi or my skincare fridge." She clutched her phone like a lifeline. Nathan stepped forward, his voice calm but searching. "Are you serious, Dad?" Edward nodded. "It's our only option." Margaret's face twisted with rage. "You incompetent fool! How could you let this happen? What kind of man loses everything?" Her words cut deep, but Edward stayed silent, turning away. Nathan followed, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Dad, we'll get through this. I'm with you." Edward's throat tightened, a tear threatening to fall. "Thank you, Nathan. You don't know what that means." By evening, the mansion was eerily quiet. No maids, no chauffeurs. Edward drove them in a beat-up pickup truck Michael had procured, the only vehicle they could afford. The road to Vermont was long and winding, Margaret complaining about the lack of air conditioning, Chloe refusing to look up from her phone despite the dying battery. Nathan, in the back, held his father's hand through the seat, his presence a quiet strength. The cabin sat in a clearing, surrounded by dense pine trees and a dirt path. Its weathered wood and rusted iron roof were a far cry from the Greenwich estate. Margaret stepped out, her designer heels sinking into the mud. "This is a nightmare," she spat. "Edward, are you insane? We can't live here." Chloe wrinkled, her nose covering her face with her scarf. "It smells like mold. And bugs. Daddy, I'm going to die here." Edward carried their bags, his voice calm. "This was my father's place. It's all we have. We'll make it work." Inside, the cabin was sparse. 2 rickety chairs, a warped table, and a single mattress in the corner. Cobwebs clung to the ceiling, and the air was thick with dust. Margaret refused to cross the threshold, folding her arms. "Take me back to civilization, Edward. Now." "We have no choice," he said, setting down a bag. "This is home." Chloe groaned. "I should have stayed with my influencer friends. They'd have let me crash in Miami." Nathan, silent until now, picked up a bag and carried it inside. "We're in this together, right? Let's help Dad." Margaret shot him a glare. "Stop acting like a saint, Nathan. We're suffering because of him." That night, they shared the mattress on the floor. A flickering lantern their only light. Mosquitoes buzzed, and Margaret slapped her arm, cursing. Chloe tossed and turned, muttering about her ruined manicure. Edward lay awake, Nathan steady, breathing beside him. "Dad," Nathan whispered, "I know this is hard, but we'll be okay." Edward's heart swelled. "You're keeping me going, son." Life in the cabin was grueling. Mornings began with fetching water from a nearby stream, and meals were simple: canned beans or boiled potatoes from a neighbor's garden. Margaret refused to help, sitting on a stump outside, fanning herself with a magazine. "This isn't life," she muttered. "This is punishment." Chloe, her phone now useless without signal, paced the yard, snapping at anyone who spoke to her. "My followers are probably unfollowing me right now. My brand is dead." Only Nathan adapted, helping Edward chop firewood or fix leaks in the roof. "I watched Grandpa do this when I was a kid," Nathan said, stacking logs. "It's not so bad." Edward smiled, pride warming his chest. "You're a good man, Nathan." Meanwhile, Margaret's resentment grew. One afternoon, she noticed a man in the village, a local businessman named Carl Bennett, who owned a lumber mill and drove a shiny SUV. He wore tailored suits and flashed a gold watch, a stark contrast to the dusty farmers around him. Margaret's eyes lit up. "Chloe," she whispered, "that man could be our ticket out." Chloe, fanning herself with a leaf, raised an eyebrow. "What's the plan, Mom?" Margaret smirked. "When one door closes, another opens. Let's see how wide this one swings." Margaret began disappearing each afternoon, claiming she was visiting neighbors. She'd return with small gifts, a bottle of soda, a new scarf, brushing off Edward's questions. "The women here are generous," she'd say, avoiding his gaze. Nathan noticed her polished nails and faint perfume, but said nothing, his heart heavy. Chloe, meanwhile, caught the eye of a local mechanic, Tom, a married man in his 40s, who promised her cash and city comforts in exchange for secret meetups. She'd sneak off to his garage, returning with new earrings or a lipstick, her smile smug. "I'm surviving, Mom," she told Margaret one night. "We're not meant for this dump." Edward sensed the shift, but focused on Nathan, teaching him to plant vegetables in the rocky soil. "This land's tough," Edward said. wiping sweat from his brow. But it's honest. Nathan nodded. Like you, Dad. One evening, as Edward struggled to light a fire, Nathan knelt beside him, showing him how to arrange the kindling. Grandpa taught me this, he said, blowing gently until flames flickered. Edward's eyes glistened. You're the only one making this bearable, son. Margaret's visits to Carl became bolder. She'd meet him at the Pineview Inn, a small motel on the village outskirts, where he'd shower her with flattery and promises. You're too refined for this place, Carl said, pouring her wine. Leave that washed-up husband. I'll set you up in a condo in Burlington. New clothes, new life.